Welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast, a real estate podcast where we bring you stories, education, and tips for investors and real estate enthusiasts. If you're interested in investing in real estate or just want to keep a pulse on what's happening in the market, then this podcast is for you. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. If you enjoy our show, please make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. Hello, everyone. This is Dave Menapace with the Hassle-Free RE podcast. And today we are going to talk about short-term rentals. My guest here, Mike Baffuto, and I met when we were in Miami. I was at a short-term rental conference and he was down there taking care of some work for his day job there. And that really started this neat relationship. And he has a super cool story that I wanted to share with everybody today. So with that, Mike, don't let me steal the spotlight. Why don't you introduce yourself and let's have some fun. Let's jump right in, man.
Yeah, let's do it. And what an interesting way to meet. I mean, I was at a conference for my full-time job in advertising technology. And I knew there was an STR conference going on in Miami at the same time. And hey, what better place to go network than in Miami? And so I ventured over to the hotel, met you guys, and I don't know if we remember much of what we talked about that first night, but we got to catch up following that and clear everything up. So yeah, Mike Baffuto, thanks so much for having me on the show. Super excited to be here. This is such a fascinating space. I really love everything about short-term rental investing, and happy to be here.
Nice. Well, with that, why don't we kind of talk about how you made the decision to get into short-term rental investing, and we can kind of start wherever you want, maybe where you initially got the idea and how that all came to life.
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to get involved in real estate. And I feel like there's so many different avenues. And it sort of, when I started looking at real estate, I'd call it maybe 5-6 years ago, it felt almost like a fad, right? It's like, are you in real estate investing, right? And my wife and I, we weren't at the time. And so we knew we wanted to buy our primary home at first. And so we purchased our primary home here in Fairfield, New Jersey. And all during that, we had been looking at potentially getting into multifamily investing in the Jersey area. And so we were looking in places like Jersey City and Weehawken and Hoboken. And we had been looking for like a year. I remember our weekends were just flooded with going to look at homes built in the 30s in Weehawken, like these big historical homes. But the big problem there is the price point on them was like $2-3 million. And, the cap rates on them and the returns just weren't there. So we looked for a little while, thereafter. I happened to be introduced to a net new realtor. I think our last realtor got worn out from all the homes we looked at. We weren't buying yet, so I feel bad for her. But anyway, we were introduced to this gentleman who started. That's right. I'll pay her back one day. But we got introduced to a new realtor, and he started to show us a few properties. We only saw like 2 weekends of showing, so I feel like we hadn't worn out our welcome. And then one day I met him on a Sunday morning and he's like, yeah, I'm really excited. He's like, me and a partner of ours, we just purchased a 16-bedroom home near Disney in Orlando. And I was like, 16 bedrooms, that must have been, $2-3 million. And he was like, no, like we paid, whatever it was. I think it was like $800,000. And I was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, I know this is non-traditional, but would you be willing to introduce me to your realtor down in Orlando, Kissimmee area? And after a little prying, he finally did. And that's when we sort of, got involved in really taking a look at short-term rental investing seriously. In a matter of 4 months, we found ourselves not knowing much about the space and closing on a 10-bedroom home in Kissimmee, Florida, brand new construction. It was a spec home. It was ready to go. And it's like 15 minutes from the park. And I think we got that for a little less than $600,000. And then our adventure began, right? We were scrambling. We're like, I was always told like punch above your weight and then learn how to fight, and that's what it felt like in short-term rental investing. I knew nothing. And so what did we do as the first thing? We got to get a property manager. And so we went down
Right.
that rabbit hole, and all these property managers like, yeah, we can do, 100K a year and we're going to take 30%. I was like, well, these numbers just don't add up. And then I just started to do a lot more research, and I found out there was almost like this movement in short-term rental investing to sort of take back the reins and self-manage. And I was like, well, I'm in advertising technology. A lot of what I do from a day job perspective is automation and implementing systems to make sure things run smoothly. And from there, we just I started going through, Bill Faith's, short-term rental investing courses, the Superhost library, and I followed all of these other people in the industry that have really made an impact. And then, we just started setting up these systems. But the cool thing is, out of that big debacle of interviewing property managers, we were introduced to a lovely lady named Karen Woodward. Shout out to Karen. She's amazing. Who really helped us co-develop this theme for our house. It definitely costed a little bit of money. And we got left with this amazing house with a Harry Potter movie theater, a pirate themed arcade room in the garage, a Beauty and the Beast custom room. I mean, this thing is absolutely amazing. We were running projections that we would do 100K our first year. We did 180 gross our first year.
It's amazing.
And yeah, it's been so much fun.
So let me ask, like, I want to rewind a little bit. One of the things that I love is that, you were looking in your own area, your own sort of, your own field, your own yard for properties. You didn't see what you were looking for, and you sort of picked up your toys and went to another sandbox. We did that as well with some long-term rentals when we started purchasing down in Tennessee. What did that discussion like? So the light bulb went off. What did that discussion look like between you and your wife, where you kind of were like, okay, yeah, this, like what was that? Just walk us through that, because I think a lot of people go at different paces within, people that are in a relationship together, and some people are cool with it and then the other one's not, and it's this thing. How'd you guys work through that?
Yeah, my wife is upstairs currently. If she was down here, maybe she would answer this a different way. But she's like, wait, what? You want to buy a house in Kissimmee, Florida, when we live in New Jersey? Are you out of your mind? There's definitely some convincing and reassurance that had to be played within our household. The dynamic of our household for a little bit was a little shaky, but like I knew this was possible. I asked myself, like, what is it that a property manager, a full-time property manager, is offering someone who's investing from another location? And the real aspect to it all, I believe, is reassurance and convenience. And I was like, well, what aspects of a property manager offer reassurance and convenience? And it's boots on the ground and having a team. And so that really, made me realize right there and then, well, we need to go ahead and establish a team. We need a cleaner and we need a maintenance guy, right? Or gal, whatever. And so we started going through and interviewing, and we met some really amazing people down there. We have a cleaner that we rely on, and we have bonus systems in place for them to incentivize them to get us 5-star reviews. So for every 5-star cleaning review we get, we go ahead and send them bonuses at the end of the month to keep them encouraged. Our maintenance guy we have on a retainer, so that no matter what, whether there's maintenance or not, he will get paid. And I think it's all about how we treat people. I like to operate on what I like to call a consumer surplus, whereby we extract more value for the people around us than we take. And that's been like the ethos that I've always lived by for quite some time. If you treat people right and you find the right team, it runs itself. And then from there, it was like, all right, how do we do the rest of the stuff? And so, I could go on for hours about the systems that take time at first to put into practice in place, but from there, there's elements that you can set and forget, right? Something as simple as the door locks. Like, I do not trust myself to remember to change the door locks for every new guest, but we can go ahead and systemate it, right? Like, put systems in place through remote lock, and we have Schlagen code, and both of those plug into our OwnerRes platform where we manage our properties. And it regenerates a new code for every single guest that pulls into our email templates that get sent to a guest to let them know that 4-digit code. And I've never had to get a call at 3 a.m. in the morning and say, hey, where's our 4-digit code? It takes care of itself. And so a lot of it's leverage and a lot of it's a team. And so once I had all those things in place, my wife loved me again. No, she loved me. She loved me the entire time, but
they can love you but not be happy with you.
That's right.
Now, did you get all of those things set up before launching, or did you sort of learn as you were going, like, okay, let's start with the locks? And the reason I ask is, even like, the bonus system for cleaners, sometimes you got to get burned a couple times before this hits home, but not always. Sometimes you learn that right at the front end. So what were some things maybe that you started off with as systems, and then maybe what were some of the systems you implemented just based on experience of things happening or not happening?
Yeah, no, some of the stuff we implemented after the fact, and some of the stuff we implemented right away. I think for us, we kept hearing about vacation management platforms and channel managers and stuff like that. And so we did a bunch of research, and at the end of the day, we agreed that OwnerRes seemed like it would be the best fit for us, right? Mm-hmm. We wanted to make sure everything was synced across the various OTAs like Airbnb and Vrbo, our direct site, localized sites, etc. We never wanted to have double bookings where we have to call somebody and say, hey, I'm so sorry, you can't stay because we already had a booking. OwnerRes allowed us the flexibility and ease to be able to create email templates, have time triggers. We have a rental agreement, which we ask guests to sign as well. All of that is housed within OwnerRes. And then the unique thing about OwnerRes, and this, I don't get paid from OwnerRes, this isn't just a plug for them, is the functionality from an API standpoint. And for those that aren't familiar, APIs are just one system pointing to another, communicating with each other what they should do. And case in point is with remote lock, right? So again, when there's a booking that happens, OwnerRes sends a signal to remote lock, hey, booking on this date occurs. Can you generate a 4-digit code? And that 4-digit code is then set to the door lock and pulled in an email template. So those were things we knew we needed right away. Right. Another one as well is we use Price Labs from a dynamic pricing standpoint. I have no idea. Like I had a good idea of what our ADR, average daily rate, should be through tools out there like AirDNA and Data Rabu and other sources, but I'm not going to have the time to go in there with a full-time job that I do for a living to change my rates all the time. And so, Price Labs is an API that plugs directly into OwnerRes, which then pushes the rates out to Airbnb and Vrbo. And that made a lot of sense to me. And so It's automatically doing optimizations along the way based on the demand in the market. And we go in there and we do some more advanced pricing strategies and optimizations. But like those were some of the systems that we put into place right away. The bonus program came in after, not because we got burnt, but because we learned about it and it just sounded like a really good idea. We wanted to make sure we're rewarding those around us for helping us, build this business.
Love that. Can you share like what that bonus structure looks like? And the reason I ask is I've heard some people will do quarterly, some people will do annual to kind of help keep those, cleaners on full year. And then I've heard some people just say, hey, after every time we get a 5-star review, I just Venmo them an extra $20 or $25. Are you comfortable sharing what your structure looks like just for people that might be
Absolutely.
interested?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're very particular in terms of what we do not want overlooked, right? And so what we've done is in our owner's closet in the Florida house, and we do this with our house in Gulf Shores, Alabama as well. On the back of the door, we have a laminated cleaning checklist. And look, do I think the cleaners are going to review this and go line by line every single time? No. But it's used as a guide. It's used directionally. We get the same cleaner every single time. We do have backup cleaners, but the same cleaner eventually becomes very familiar with your property and they know what to look out for. And so we do it on a monthly cadence. At the end of every single month, we take a look in Verbo and OwnerRes, and Airbnb. We're very honest about this. If we got 3 5-star cleaning reviews, not overall experience, just the cleaning section of it, we give 25 per cleaner, and we have 2 cleaners, so that's $50 per clean. So if it's 3 cleans at the end of the month, it's that receive 5 stars, that's an extra $150 for them at the end of the month. And we just
Right.
continue doing that. We do Christmas bonus as well. We generally, it's not contingent on cleaning, but it's, we give a $250 bonus at the end of the year to each of the cleaners, just in good faith. And so
Yeah.
those are the things that we do. We don't do that in Gulf Shores because the Gulf Shores isn't as profitable, but we do the regular cleaning bonus.
Right. I love that. It's really interesting. So now, like with my cleaners, once I find one that I really like, especially if it's on the front end when I'm buying the property, I'll walk through the house with them as I'm getting ready to furnish the house. And there is a bit of a balance, but I do start off by asking them, I say, hey, tell me everything that you hate that's either already here or that you've grown accustomed to hating in other people's houses, and let's see if we can work together. An
Love that.
example, I find that cleaners really do not like bunk beds. They're very hard for, but you and I both know two houses next to each other, one that can sleep 12 versus one that can sleep 8, you're going to make more money at the one that sleeps 12 as long as people have enough general space, right? So I was able to work with them to find bunk beds where the bottom bunk is at floor level instead of 2 feet up. And so the top bunk is at 4 feet instead of 6. Cool, they're happy again. But I've had a friend that's so extreme, and it was a friend of mine who has several houses up in Maine who does the strategy with the cleaners. And he got so intense that he changed the flooring in his house because they hated mopping that one. But he's happy. He's also pretty handy. So him throwing down some floating floor over 1,200 square feet was a weekend away and peace and calm for him. It's not really for me, but good for him. So, but to your point, I think that the more ownership that you can give these different people that are going to work in your short-term rental, whether it's a handyman or cleaner or whatever, the more pride that they're going to have. And it goes a long way towards keeping people, especially good people. And a lot of times in these vacation, I mean, up in Maine and Cape Cod where mine are, I do find that a lot of people are struggling just hoping their cleaners show up. I have not had
Yeah,
that problem, so
that's
it goes a
right.
long way.
That's so true. We've never run into the issue of that, but the walkthrough, to your point, is so important. We got a property in Gulf Shores, Alabama, up and running. Actually, we closed. It was right before New Year's Eve, this past New Year's Eve,
Uh-huh.
and we were up and running in March. And I remember I met with the cleaner, and the owner's closet in the Gulf Shores beach cottage is like a 4x4 entryway. You literally have to duck and like kind of crawl
You're
in.
kidding me.
And our cleaner called us. She's like, "There's a big problem." Like after we gave her a walkthrough, she's like, "I'm claustrophobic," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "This, she's not going to go in the closet." And so what we ended up doing to make her life a lot easier, we went back down there and we bought a bunch of shelving. And so right when you kind of like poke your head in, all of the shelving is right there. She could just like reach her arm in and grab what she needs. And we keep that supplied.
Nice.
That was something that was important to her. And we knew we wanted to work with her. She seemed like a great cleaner. And so we put that into practice.
I love that. Another thing that I'd love to touch on is, um, so you met with, her name was Karen. Was it Karen Woodward? Was that her name?
Karen
So,
Woodward. Yeah.
so you have this house. It sounds like it was somewhat of a blank slate, right? You've just spent even though it's cheaper now or then than it would be now, you've still spent, this is your first one. This is your baby. What, before jumping in and doing all like the neat sort of themed decorating, what were the numbers looking like? And an example is, like, I know in Maine, I'm going to make 15% more annually if I have a hot tub, right? So like it was a no brainer for me to buy a hot tub. And then of course I had to buy a generator so that we didn't lose power to protect the hot tub. It's like this whole thing. But to my point, what was sort of that analysis like? Like, okay, we can spend this amount of money to do all this. Here's the additional income or occupancy. How did you work through that?
Yeah, so we had a pretty robust pro forma that we ran, and for those that aren't familiar, it's literally just our own Excel sheet that anybody can find online, where we just took a look at, what are those operating expenses, right? What are our cleaning fees? What are our short-term replenishment on coffee, towels, toilet paper, soap, because we provide all that for our guests. What are long-term replenishment costs? What is our mortgage, interest rate, PMI, insurance? We had to factor all of that in. And then once we went on sites like AirDNA and got a good idea of what our average daily rate and occupancy can be, you can actually start to figure out what sort of cash flow will we get post all of the expenses. What we started to notice, and what our interior designer, Karen, let us know, is like, hey, in order to be successful down in this market, you really have to theme it out. And I'll let Karen tell you guys the story if you ever chat. But you know, I, I'm a trust guy. Like, I trust people, but at first, when I hear you really need to theme it out, I'm like, well, but you're the interior designer. There's a conflict of interest there, isn't there? But after I started to do a little bit more research, it's the properties that were in that 75th, 80, 90 percentile of performance are the ones that really stood out. Uh, Kissimmee is, I won't say oversaturated, but there's a lot of Airbnbs in Kissimmee. Um, and the competition can be fierce. And so we really wanted to make sure we put in the right time and money and effort into the house to make sure it stood out, not only in our community, but in the area of Kissimmee itself. And so, we started working through some ideas. We put a little bit north of 100,000 into the house, and we were able to furnish the entire house. I mean, floor to ceiling, because there was no furniture in it whatsoever.
Right.
And prices have probably changed since then to do such a theme job, but we went in and we worked with them, and there was a level of autonomy that we had to give to her as well. Again, she'll tell you the story if you ever chat, but I remember they were going through designing and doing the work, and I'm like, I don't know, like, are they going to get done? Is this going to look good? Is this going to look crappy? And not the property manager, the cleaner went in, and she was like, oh, we're just going to go in, put some supplies in. And I was like, hey, can you take a look around, let me know what's going on? And they started snapping pictures, and the interior designer called me. She's like, why are they snapping pictures? I told you not to do that. And I was like, well, whatever. But there needed to be a level of autonomy for her, and that required some
Right.
trust. And we were amazed with the quality and craftsmanship of their work. I mean, they really made it stand out. And what's also funny is, we were told from other people in the industry, hey, the moment you close on that house, get your listing up, right? And I was like, well, there's no furniture in it. And, it's going to be a couple of, like, 2 months before we're done. They're like, well, do a really good job on your Airbnb copy then, and start to paint the picture. And I remember, my wife thought it was crazy. We put our listing up with no furniture. and we had it in our copy, like, this is going to be completed, blah, blah. We had like 6 bookings within like the first couple
Wow.
of weeks of putting it up with no furniture.
Holy moly.
You know, yeah. So we had a timetable to really deliver on, and those guests were just, amazed when they got there. They got, we had to really paint the picture for them.
They must have been blown away because I've seen photos of it, and it's
Thank you
and
so much.
and for any of our listeners, I'll put the Airbnb link, or if there's like a website, if you have like a website for it, I'll put it into the show notes. But I was amazed. I was like, damn, I want to go
Thanks. Yeah.
there.
EnchantedRoseVilla.com. We actually have like video walkthrough tours and breakouts of all the different rooms. Um, but yeah, and so I mean, it was a wonderful experience. Really making sure again that team is in place is, and like, how do you even build a team? I was like, how do we do that?
Right.
We're in an age today where there's so much data and so much information out there, and just go onto Facebook, right? Just go onto Facebook and join the various short-term rental investing groups that are out there, and just ask, does anybody have a reputable cleaner in Kissimmee? Does anybody have a reputable cleaner in Gulf Shores, Alabama? And call and interview and do your due diligence, and you'll definitely find the right folks to work with.
That's awesome. And honestly, I bet like going back to the design, the difference could have been like in year one, that call it $80,000, right? Someone's telling you'll
Yeah,
make 100, you make 180, I bet you wouldn't have
it
touched
is.
that had you not made that investment.
I hope my neighbor in Kissimmee never listens to this, but our neighbor in our community down in Kissimmee, really great guy. Him and his wife were fantastic people. And I remember, meeting them for the first time I went down there, and I did a walkthrough of their house. It was a beautiful house. Don't get me wrong, absolutely beautiful, but incredibly light on the theming. A year later, when me and Marissa, my wife, were just ecstatic about how much we did in gross, he was calling me, asking me like they were about to sell. They just weren't doing good at all. And I think it was 2 bedrooms smaller than ours. I think theirs was an 8 bedroom. But I mean, side by side comparison, night and day, we were thriving, and they were trying to keep the lights on, and that made
Right.
all the difference. And even with, the Gulf Shores, Alabama property, actually, Karen, we begged her and her team did us a favor and drove from Orlando to Gulf Shores to do our property in Gulf Shores. And our property within Westside Cottages is doing really, really, really well, and it's a tier 2. And that's because we made the kids' room with really cool bunks, and we have a gaming station, we have an arcade in there, the color palette of the house, the decor, the furnishing, all of that is so important. It's like, how are we going to go buy $1 million property, or call it 500,000, depending on our price point, but not want to put a few $1,000s into the interior design?
Right.
Like, that is so important. And then I also see a lot of people make mistakes as they walk into their property after they end up spending a bunch of money to do some interior design, and then they're snapping photos on their iPhone. It's like, no, we need to find a professional photographer to go in there and take the right photos, because photos are the ones that are going to tell the story when guests are looking on Airbnb. And so that was something we knew we had to do as well.
And on the photos front, and then I'd love to go back because I want to talk about the transition from one Airbnb to the second. So don't let me forget.
Okay.
The photos, it's really interesting. There are tons and tons and tons of photographers out there that do like real estate listing photos. As me being an agent as well as a short-term rental operator, I will tell you there is a difference between someone taking listing photos and somebody taking Airbnb VR, like short-term rental photos, because the short-term rental photos, it's got to be like magazine worthy, right? Like it's got to be staged. It can be fixated on something neat. Like it doesn't, I mean, you get up to, I think it's like 40 or 50 photos in each of those platforms. VRBO might even allow like 75 now. I can't remember, but it's like, I've had up in Maine, this drove me nuts. And we're actually going to redo all of the photos because the photographer ran ahead of me and just started like snapping photos. And I can see like plastic shower curtain. I'm like, man, like that thing should have been shut. I'm not a professional stager by any means, but having like dinner plates set and like having, kicking on the fireplace or starting a fire in the fire pit. Like there's keeping the hot tub running. Like there's all these different things. And so if for anyone that's listening, if you can work with somebody who has specifically taken photos for short-term rentals, you're sort of one step ahead. So with that, you have this property in Florida. It's going fantastic. You got the itch. You're like, I want another one. So let's talk about how you located and funded and set up the Gulf Shores property.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We definitely had the itch. We still have the itch. We're about to make an offer on a property in Western North Carolina. So we're really excited about that. But I think the itch was sparked because yes, we were so successful in Kissimmee. We're still successful. We're actually remodeling our game room as we speak right now. It's because we want to make sure we keep it up to date and give previous guests a reason to come back and stay with us again, right? And so we're making it into a Lego themed arcade room.
Cool.
But it has to do with our own. I'm really excited about that one for sure. It has to do with our own financial goals and the way we're actually looking to invest. And so in Kissimmee, we did it as a second home. We go there often. We're actually going down there in 3 weeks as a family. And so we do qualify for that 10% down. And that made the deal much more favorable in Kissimmee. And so we wanted to reinvest in Kissimmee, of course, but what we started to notice was like, well, we already owned a property there. So the next one would have to be an investment property. And, now the numbers are much more expensive. And now that we have to put 20 to 25% and do the interior design, it just doesn't make as much sense. And so I started to hear a lot about Gulf Shores, Alabama, Gulf Shores, Alabama, Gulf Shores, Alabama. And I was like, what is this Gulf Shores, Alabama? Like, I've never heard of Gulf Shores, Alabama. And so we started to do some research, and it is a lovely place. I don't know if you've ever been there, Dave, but it is beautiful. And so, okay. You got to check it out, man. There's like this famous spot in Gulf Shores called The Hangout, which is like spring break. It's a wild place. It's not always wild down there. It's family friendly for sure.
Yeah.
But it is beautiful. And it's really, if you follow the Florida sort of peninsula up, northwest, you hit right when you hit Alabama, it's there. So it's almost Florida. Yeah. And we were like, so long as we go here and the numbers make sense, we qualify for another second home, a vacation home. And same thing, we love it so much. We go down there, we meet the requirements of the mortgage, but we knew we could do 10% down there as well. And that made the cash on cash return and ROI that much more favorable. And so we started looking down there. I mean, beachfront properties, tier 1 on the beach, very expensive, at least for us, right? And so we actually found a good short-term rental investor-friendly realtor down there, someone like yourself, Dave, who knows the space, who's really helping clients, run analysis and stuff like that. And she found us a place in what's called Westside Cottages. It was built in 2020. I think someone bought it low and sold it a little higher. We were okay with that. And we bought that property, and same thing. We had the interior design company come out and help us get it up and running, and that's been fantastic. And that's more realistic returns. I think we're doing about a 30% cash on cash for that one. But yeah, it's been great. And again, people are telling us, hey, you're gonna really slow down in October. You're really gonna slow down in September. But we've remained booked, I'd say, at about 80% occupancy through September and October. And again, I think it all goes back to, how we really stage the place, our copy, our photos, and the craftsmanship. And like, we really care about the properties, And so, so that was our second one. And then all throughout all of this, in my company, I'm in advertising full time. There's not to get too in depth in my personal like finances, but like there's capital gains that happened in the last couple of years through equity sales and stocks from my company. And then, this could be for a later conversation, but like we got exposed to the tax benefits of short-term rental investing, and we were just blown away. And so that was just another perk to it all.
I mean, similar to us, that is, how we got into our first property was my wife's company went public. We didn't get a ton of money. And back then we didn't even know we could have done 10% down, or we would have bought two houses, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So we did like a traditional 20% down, but that money that we had from the stocks that had vested a year before or what have you, we just sat with it because we knew we didn't need another car and we didn't need to buy a new house. So we just sat with it in like the brokerage account until this opportunity arose. And same, that was how we got into it as well. And it's obvious. I mean, I don't work at W2 anymore because of this cottage in Cape Cod and all the decisions that were made after that.
Right. Of course. Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool.
So that is really neat. So you did 10% down in Gulf Shores. You were able to leverage the same design team and bring them up there. You're seeing really great occupancy. And one of the things I always tell people too is like there's a very prescribed formula for revenue and short-term rentals, and it's super easy, right? It's occupancy times at a basic level your average daily rate, and that's what you're going to make. You know what I mean? And so there's only so many levers that you can pull.
Absolutely.
You can pull the lever of adjusting the price, but really you want to keep that occupancy. I've found like the sweet spot for me is that in the high season, as long as I'm 95% or higher, I'm good. And in the low season, as long as I can keep it 50% or higher, then I'm really good, because your choices are sort of shut it down for like in Cape Cod, we're fortunate that ours has heat. So we can keep it open year round. We usually will shut it, like block off the calendar for a little bit because we enjoy making updates to the house. And that's how we've leveraged equity. And it's just makes it so we can then turn around and raise the price each year when we do some stuff. And a lot of proactive things just to, take care of headaches or what could be a headache. Was there any big change that you found from managing one property to managing two? And I ask because my personal experience when I had houses in different markets and different types of houses, like, thank goodness I had the systems in place that I did, because I would really have no more hair up here. I would have lost it, so what was that? Was it just like plug it in and you're good to go? Or were there things about the market that you had to learn and the clientele that goes to that market?
It was a whole different ball game, right? And not in an overwhelming sense, but to your point, the systems that we had put in place at the beginning when setting up the Florida house, and then thereafter, slowly implementing additional add-ons to it, allowed us, without even knowing it, to scale, right? And so, like, I think in this business, scaling and future strategies is probably one of the most important things that you want to look at. And again, we did it without even really knowing it, but it really played in well when we got the Gulf Shores property up and running, because it was as simple as sort of rinse and repeating the email templates that we had. Yes, we had to tweak copy and adjust it. We had to go to Gulf Shores. That's another thing I always, suggest is like we closed on both of them, actually, Florida and Alabama, without going there first. Like, we just closed, the numbers made so much sense, but thereafter we went, right? We had to go there, get it set up, buy supplies, etc., and then do market research. What are some of the top restaurants around there? How close in proximity are we to the lagoon and the pier for fishing? In Gulf Shores, we have things like beach equipment. We have boogie boards. We have bikes. We have a grill, right? For that outdoor sort of appeal to families, that it's a drive-in market. That's really what Gulf Shores is. I mean, not many people from New York are flying to Gulf Shores for a vacation. It's usually Jersey Shore. But down there, it's a drive-in market. And so you really have to appeal and make sure you're setting up your copy and telling a story of the property to the people that it's going to resonate most with. And it's important to understand who they are, right? And that also is super helpful when you do things like Facebook marketing. So for Orlando, we do national. We even do some international advertising as well. We don't go crazy with budgets. I mean, we have minimal budgets, but for Gulf Shore, you're going to want to do a geo-targeted campaign to the surrounding markets within a drive-in proximity. So two very different markets, two nuanced markets. You do need to do your research. And then also another thing you want to make sure is anytime you're looking at a new market is make sure you're following and adhering to the local municipality around zoning. You know, too many times I've heard of people investing in properties and trying to get them up and running in short-term rentals, for then all of a sudden, like right away, realize, oh no, I can't operate as a short-term rental because of zoning restrictions.
Right.
And so we had to be familiar with both of those as well.
And like you and I just ran into that with Salem,
That's right.
Salem,
We did.
Massachusetts. And, I was talking to somebody the other day, he's a real estate agent in Nashville, and, he kind of learned the hard way. He bought a house that was in an HOA, and they had a restriction on short-term rentals, and that it's outside of Nashville, but like, these are all things that a few phone calls, looking online, can kind of get you where you're going. And like you and I have talked, like some restriction is not bad, or some sort of process is not bad, right? Where, Cape Cod, for example, their process is really simple. They allow you to have, I think, like 2 people per bedroom based on the size of the septic tank, and then add 1 more. So my 2-bedroom cottage there can sleep 5. You know what I mean? And that's cool.
Absolutely.
That's simple. That's easy. Up in Maine, they don't even have a code enforcer for buildings, so they're a long way away from having any sort of permitting system for short-term rental. But there's these nuances are out there, and they're really, really easy to find and important to know, I would say.
Yeah, no, so important. And even like, I think it's a little regulation is good, right? It kind of keeps some confinement on it. There's sort of requirements already in place. It's not the wild west when there's a little bit of requirements like licensing and inspection, whatever. Those things can tend to be good.
Right. And what is nice, I mean, when I was buying these long-term rentals in Tennessee, I was not going to bother myself when I was putting 10 grand down on $100,000 house. But certainly, like up in Maine, Cape Cod, I had been vacationing in that same exact part of Cape Cod for 10 straight years. So it was like, I knew that thing inside and out. As an agent now, I've sold a lot of houses, even though I don't live on Cape, I live an hour and a half away. But just because I know, on this side of the street, it's worth 600. On that side of the street, it's worth 500. You know what I mean? Like I know those things.
Absolutely.
Up in Maine, my house is near Sunday River Ski Resort. I grew up like driving 4 hours north every February vacation and going skiing there. So I had a good general awareness of like what was happening up there. But it is good. Bill's told a million war stories of he's gone somewhere and learned something and walked away from deals. So it's important to know what you're getting into. So what's the next phase? I know you have, hopefully, we have one for you under contract soon. What's sort of your broader goal, 5 or 10 years out? What would make you really happy if you were to look back and see, these are the trees we've planted?
Yeah, I think one, I think is making enough in short-term rental income that I can go ahead and say I'm comfortable walking away from a W-2 job. I want to be able to do this full time. I love it. I love everything about it. And yes, it's stressful sometimes. And yes, there's things to deal with, and that is life, right? We want to go ahead and start eventually making really strategic purchases in markets where we want to travel often. Gulf Shores, it was one that made sense from a numbers perspective. We want to get to that position where we start thinking long term of like, hey, when we're older and we're retired, we just travel the states, maybe internationally, maybe we do some Airbnbs internationally. And right now, it's the houses that we're buying are based solely on ROI and cash on cash rate. right? Because we want to get our working capital back sooner than later so that we can continue to reinvest and scale. Over the next, I'd say 3 years, we want to add at least 3 to 5 more properties to our book of business. And all along the way, we learn new things, right? The one that I'm looking to get under contract right now, that would be another 10% down because it's in another market.
Right.
But that gets capped after a certain time. You can't do that. I believe, what, 4 times you could do
Four,
that? And it might
four or
vary depending
five.
on your,
Yeah.
and then after that, you got to start looking at alternative ways of financing and funding. And so we want to cap that out as soon as possible, right? With deals that make sense and continue to look to scale from there. And again, we want to do it so that it makes sense from a tax benefit perspective. So we work with a real estate CPA right now where, our minds were blown at the benefits of real estate investing. And not only just traditional real estate investing, but particularly short-term rental investing, where if you work on your property more than 100 hours or more and more than anyone else, you qualify for true material participation. I had no idea what that meant. But that meant that property can move from passive to non-passive, and we can actually take a loss on that property through more advanced tax strategies, which things like accelerated depreciation, which eventually would get phased out.
Right.
But that will allow us to offset capital gains on our stocks and personal, which has just opened our eyes so much, from a tax benefit. And, Robert Kiyosaki always talks about that he doesn't pay any tax. He does, and he gets rich off other people's money. What does he call it? Like OPM, other people's money. He talks about, and that
OPM.
all OPM, that all started coming to life. And I'm like, wow, everything I've been reading up until this point, we're actually starting to live. So long-winded answer. We're just trying to scale as
Love it.
much as feasibly possible. And we're trying to stretch ourselves as individuals as well.
Well, and so Kim and I are really wired like you in that, once we have enough in our savings account where we can weather, a 6 months of no income, at least for one of us, at that point, like that money's not doing any good by growing in our bank account. And we've seen the proof in the houses that we've bought. We could do we could do a podcast only on that topic, probably.
That's right.
You know what I mean? But to your point, when we start to look at that and we say like, okay, putting that in a growing asset that is at least growing in value by whatever inflation is, I'm about to raise my nightly rates for next year by 9.1%. Why? Because last time I checked, that's what inflation was, and people still pay it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just, there's a lot to it. And what I try and tell people is that, we're at doomsday scenario, right? Worst case scenario, you can sell a house and you can go on with your day. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these, and how to underwrite them and analyze them. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of people, some of the mastermind you're in. I mean, so it's amazing. I totally agree. And it's fun. Like, I don't know about you, but I get fired up every time I see a 5-star review.
Every time, man. We live for it. I still like anybody that wants to hear about that 5-star review, I'll call them and tell them, it's great.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, for anybody that's listening, it is the best feeling ever. It really is. And it's like, and I don't want to pester our guests, right? So I don't call them or but if one of them calls me, like, I like build friendships with these people. I'm on a text basis sometime with some of our guests. And it's just, listen, I think the benefit of it for sure is the revenue, right? It's making money from short-term rental investing. But like the other benefit to it as well, especially in Florida, is seeing families come together. Like I had a guest text us 3 weeks ago, a selfie shot of their entire family in our Kissimmee Airbnb property down there. And they're like, you made this happen. You brought our family together. And it was almost like a tear in my eye. I was like so happy about that. People like really love it. We get to put smile on people's faces. And, I always heard that old sort of saying, like, do something you love and it won't be work, and that's it right here. What we're doing, this like isn't work. It's really not, I mean, it is, but I love it. So it's so much easier to do.
I love that. It is fulfilling. It is super, super fulfilling. Well, with that, I know we're coming towards the end of our time here. How can and we'll put both your Airbnb links in the show notes. How can people find you though if they want to ping you and ask sort of what you've done or how you've done it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to check out our Florida house, which I definitely highly suggest, it's Enchanted Rose Villa
Hmm.
.com. I have an Instagram. It's just M Bafuto. That's MB as in boy, A, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, U, T as in Thomas O, 85. That's Instagram. You can message me on there. And yeah, happy to give the other sort of Facebook channels that we have for our other property. If anybody's interested, feel free to reach out. And if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out and ask questions. I'm happy to, help people along their journey as they're just getting started. It was done for us, so we want to go ahead and pass that on as well.
I love it. Well, thanks, man. This was a lot of fun, and we should have, if the offer does get accepted in North Carolina, it would be fun to have you back on, and we could kind of walk through more like the beginning stages of getting one of these things ready. I think that would be super cool, sort of in the moment, or almost a little series on it.
Yeah, I'd love that. This one's going to be a little different too because there's going to be actually some remodeling. So it's a not as new of a home, so it's a completely new ball game. I've been on the phone today, even before we get an offer accepted with contractors down there trying to figure that all out. But we'll make it work. So yeah, let's definitely have another session if that goes through.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. Again, for everyone, this was Mike Bafuto, and all of the links and everything, those will be in the show notes. And thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave.